All right, let's talk about something that's been on my mind now for the better part of probably a year to a year and a half now. And that's the idea of putting too much on a WordPress website and this idea of what should be put on a WordPress website versus put somewhere else or utilized through a SaaS service or something like that. Lately, I felt like there's this, well, it's not lately. I think this has been the case now for years, probably. I think that the trend has been for so long, how much can we cram all into our WordPress website? The big reasons for that, I think there's three pretty big reasons, and they're reasons that I have personally identified with. The first one is cost or price of utilizing various third-party SaaS services versus obtaining plugin licenses and being able to put everything on your own website. The other idea is that fewer tools are theoretically simpler. I'm not saying that any of these are accurate, by the way. I think by the end of this video, I'll have refuted a good part of most of them. But it's this idea that fewer tools are easier, or fewer places to engage with are easier. For example, having everything, on your WordPress website somehow makes it easier, which I think is actually the opposite of reality, but it's something that I've thought in the past. And the third one is that this idea, particularly this is with agencies usually, but I've felt it bleed over into digital product fulfillment and things like that. But it's the idea that you'll be taken more seriously by your customers if you look like it's all your platform, if it feels all like it's white labeled and it's, someone logs in and it feels like a seamless, oh, I'm on Convology.com and all of this is made possible on Convology.com. And there's this like false idea in a lot of people's heads, and I 100% am guilty of this in the past, that, oh, they'll think it's mine. They'll think I made this thing. They'll think that this is my setup and it's, unique to me. I think that's totally a completely false premise. I think that nobody cares. Just being totally honest, I don't think a single person cares. What matters to other people, and again, we'll refute this, and again, I don't want to go too deep into this, but what people care about is usability, and this is from the customer's perspective. Usability, ease of use doesn't make sense in the rest of the ecosystem that they've signed up for, right? If I buy a video from you, is it super easy to get that video quickly, watch it, get what I wanted out of it? If I bought a community, is it super easy to get access, engage with the community? Does it feel cohesive? Do I have to go over here to access my account versus go over here to engage in the community and go over here to look at the courses that are supposed to be all part of it? I don't think people care if it's all on your website versus all on another SaaS platform. They just want the thing, they want the value that they purchased. So those are some of the reasons, the three big ones, at least for me, over the years, as to why I would look to put everything on a WordPress website. And I really feel like things are changing, particularly as more and more come out, more and more tools and plugins come out for WordPress, and some things I've seen over the year, or the past year and maybe 2 years or so. Before I dive into some of those examples, though, and some of the things that I feel like you should think twice about coming into 2025, into this new year, about putting on your website, before we dive into those, I think it would be good to establish what I think collectively the world has acknowledged are things that would never go on a self-hosted WordPress-based website. Things like videos, like video hosting. I think everybody can agree that you don't put the videos on your server, you don't put them in your WordPress library, you don't host them on their same server, and there's reasons for that. There's bandwidth, there's storage space, there's performance resources, CPU usage and stuff like that. We look for external tools for those things. We utilize YouTube, Wistia, Vimeo, the list goes on. Another thing we don't put on our website, personal data, right? We don't store people's credit cards. We don't store passwords and sensitive data in ways that are not secure. Most people actually do on the password side. But generally speaking, we don't put things that are sensitive and can be leaked, lost, stolen, hacked, you name it. So if we look at those reasons, right? If we look at why we don't put video on our server, storage space, bandwidth, performance resources, and why we don't put things like personal data on there, right? Security, loss of data, that type of thing. Those actually apply to a lot more of these tools that we're putting on our websites, particularly our WordPress websites, that I think a lot of people are really stopping and thinking about. There are two and a half things I want to talk about related to this, things that I'm seeing more and more people put on their websites, historically myself included, things that I have worked on changing over the past couple of years. The first one, and I think possibly maybe the most important one, is an email service. I know that tools like Fluent CRM are super popular. I'm not going to single out Fluent CRM. There are many different email tools for WordPress, but Fluent CRM seems to be the most popular one in my community. Now, I think all the reasons why you would put Fluent CRM on your website, some are related to what we talked about before. Cost and price being, I think, the number one reason you would choose a WordPress-based email marketing solution rather than signing up for a tool like Kit or ActiveCampaign or Brevo or a tool like that. In most cases, a tool like Fluent CRM does not charge you for the number of subscribers, right? You could have 100,000 people on your email list and it wouldn't cost you essentially any more than having one person on your list. Whereas as soon as you start hitting around 10,000 people on a tool like Kit or ActiveCampaign, your monthly bill goes much, much higher. But there are some hidden costs and risks associated with using a WordPress-based email tool that I think a lot of people aren't giving enough proper attention to. And ways of circumventing or going around those end up adding to cost and risk, etc. So, I mean, let's talk about it, right? So one of the examples, a couple examples that I've had in recent months, I've had clients as well as members of the Combology community start to run into issues with Fluent CRM. And again, I'm not picking on Fluent CRM. I feel like this is completely valid for any WordPress-based email solution, but I'll just use Fluent CRM because it's the most popular. So a couple of examples. One of the members of my community ran into an issue where they ran out of storage space on their website. Not for the reason you would think. They have a fantastic host with a perfectly acceptable WordPress plan, one that I use for many sites for me and my clients. They're actually using the hosting that I recommend. But they ran out of space, and it's not for the reason you think. They actually ran out of space because they have a very large email list. And that email list, although the list itself doesn't take up a lot of, let's call it, space in the database, their database was getting massively bloated because of the statistics and the historical data about their email list. If they have, let's say, 10,000 people on their email list, pretty good size, but nothing ridiculous, right? If they have 10,000 people on their email list, it took them only about 2 years to reach the point where their host was telling them, you've got to do something about this. You need to delete the data, or you got to pay more to get a bigger server because your database is exponentially growing as more and more people get added, right? It just goes like this as the data starts to store. Now, there's a solution. You could delete that data. However, you're losing a lot of the historical data associated with that email list. And here's another problem. It's hard to separate old data from new data because the analytics of your email list get stored in the database. So it's very, very hard to go in and say, well, I only want to delete, 2 years ago, but nothing in the current year, right? It's much harder to do that than it is to just let it all sit there. So in this example, you'd have to lose your data on opens, clicks, all that stuff. Send, deliverability rate, whatever your tool tracks. You'd have to lose all of that in order to free up your storage space on your server. Not an ideal situation. Another example that I see all the time with a WordPress-based email solution has to do with cron jobs. Those of you that are a little techier or a little more informed on the topic would be saying right now, oh, that's not a big deal. You can go to one of those cron websites and set up a cron that pings your server. You can ask your host to set up a cron for you. You can add this line of code to your PHP file and your SMTP, upload it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, true. But that's not the problem I'm talking about. I'm talking about a problem where the timing gets thrown off for a reason that I don't know. I'm not techie enough to know. I've talked to Fluent CRM support. My clients have talked to Fluent CRM support. My community members have talked to support on both sides of the issue with Fluent CRM and with the hosting provider. And no one can seem to figure it out. Everyone just seems to be pointing fingers the other direction. And the issue has to do with cron jobs, or at least we think cron jobs, because it all has to do with timing. Things aren't happening on the timing that they should be happening. Things are getting missed. Things are being duplicated. Something is going on, and maybe it's related to the database getting too big, which goes into another issue in general, which is the database gets too big. And now we've introduced another problem where you have more points of failure that Unfortunately, you are solely responsible for if your email tool is on your WordPress hosting. Sure, there can be backups, which we're going to get to in a second. Sure, there can be staging websites to test things. We can get to that in a second too. Fluent CRM has really no way of helping you. They don't have servers, they don't have your data. It's all on you. And your host is just going to say, hey, look, we're providing you hosting. We can help you troubleshoot some of this performance, but it's going to reach a point where we can only help you up to the point where the problem is your plugin. And then you're going to have to go to your plugin provider for help. Right? I think anyone that's managed websites knows exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to that type of transactional relationship. Now, I mentioned the idea of backups and staging. Well, staging is almost a complete non-starter because in most cases, if you just created a staging site of your current website that had Fluent CRM running, what's going to happen? Well, first off, you've created two instances of your Fluent CRM or your email tool, meaning that you've got automations running here and automations running here, and the data is not synced. We'll get to how you could sync it in a second, but I don't find that as really truly a valid solution. But essentially, you've got two versions running. What happens if, when you create a staging version of your website, somebody signs up for your email list? They're going to be signed up for your email list on one site, not the other, depending on how you've got it set up. But in most cases, how most people set things up, they're getting signed up on one site, not the other. And what happens if somebody runs through an automation or unsubscribes? They're unsubscribing on one site, but not the other. And then what happens when you push that staging site live? You're pushing an old version on top of the new version. What happened to all those people on your live site that were running through your automations, receiving that email 2 days later, if the cron jobs worked, receiving that email 3 days later, clicking on a link, getting tagged this, etc., all that segmentation you have running, that's not being pushed to your staging site in most cases. So you've pushed your staging site live, you've overwritten everything, and you're back to square one, and suddenly people who unsubscribed are getting emails from you again. And someone who waited 2 days and got an email from you just waited 2 more days and got the same email. So we're going to run into problems when we use staging. Now, there are ways around it. There are tools that you can use that will, in many cases, only stage parts of your website or keep other parts in sync. I've had varying degrees of success with them, and that introduces a technical hurdle, which is one of the reasons why you're using Fluent CRM, right? To avoid some of those technical hurdles of putting all the tools on your site. You can see we're starting to run into that fallacy that I was talking about of having it be simpler by having everything in-house. So the solution that is guaranteed to work here is just not to do a staging website. Well, that's not always a valid option. The other option is, just put Fluent CRM on a subdomain that you never do anything else on, so you'll never really need to put it on a staging environment. And while that's true, it's kind of annoying, right? Because now you have to have a second WordPress site, which means for many hosts, an additional cost. And if it's not an additional cost, because maybe you get 3 sites on your plan, you're still using a site that you could have used for something else. Opportunity cost is a valid thing, and you're probably paying more for 3 sites than one anyway. The next thing is backups. And backups have the exact same flaws that I just went over for staging sites. I don't need to repeat myself there. Backups are it's so weird because they're an absolute mandatory must-have thing. However, if you restore a backup, all the same problems are back into play. And there's no way to back up the data otherwise. So backups are, or can be, also a complete nightmare, yet something you must do because you don't want to lose your data, which really is the last point on this, which is maintaining long-term data. And that's where we'll come full circle on this one. You'll come full circle of wanting that long-term data to be accessible to you. However, if your server storage gets too big, you got to get rid of it, but you need it anyway, which is why you're taking backups to ensure you have it when you need it. Hopefully you can see the issue there. All right, so that's an email marketing platform on WordPress, and that's why I have come to the realization that I just don't think that's a really good idea, and why I'm going to speak particularly to businesses. I think as a business, that's not a good idea. That's not a smart idea to put so much of your business and something that's so important as your email list and your email marketing on your WordPress site. Now, I'll caveat that by saying Fluent CRM and tools like it, again, not picking on Fluent CRM, are a phenomenal way to get started. They're a great way to dip your toe in the water, see if it's something that you like, see if it's something that you can keep up with, that you want to do, that actually helps your business. But as soon as you reach the point of saying, you know what, this is a good idea for my business, or for my hobby or my website, something that's going to grow. If you expect this to grow in any significant way, and I mean by a couple thousand people on your email list, and where you're making money off of it, then it's time to consider an external solution. And it doesn't have to be an expensive one. You don't have to look at the kits or the active campaigns or the MailChimps of the world. You can find tools and you can use tools out there that don't penalize you for having more subscribers. All right, let's go on to the next one. I'm going to kind of, like I said, there's 2.5 of these. This is number 2, and the last one kind of loops in with these others. But the next one is communities. A big push this last year has been everybody should start a community, which I happen to agree with. I think maybe not everybody should start a community, but I think communities are a phenomenal tool to have as a business, a content creator, content provider, digital product solutions, etc. I have a community. My community is not in WordPress, and this was actually a decision that I made back in 2020 when I decided I didn't want my community to be WordPress based, because I come from the days of the PHP BB, the what do they call it? It's been so long, I've even forgotten. It's been almost 20 years, I think. Those old school forums, right? The InVision forums, we used to build websites using some PHP tool. If you know, you know. But you should also know and be familiar with some of the flaws that those tools have, right? Communities are prone to bloat. The code bloats, slows down your website, slows down your servers. Especially back in the day, we can all relate to those slow forums. Why? Because they're resource script and they're intensive on the server. That goes back to some of the problems that the email platforms have as well. And the storage required is insane if your community grows, right? The Convologent community has over 150 people in it now. And if multiple people are posting every single day, people are replying to comments, posting images, video links, etc., that database starts to bloat and you run into the same problems. Another thing is performance and stability on your server. You need a really good server to support that. Even some of the newer tools that are coming out, like Fluent Community and SureDash. SureDash doesn't consider itself a community per se. I think Fluent Community does. SureDash, for example, has even said, as of the time of recording this video, has said that they haven't even really done the tests yet on the server specs that you're going to need. There's a Facebook post about it. Someone asked, and the response was, once we get out of alpha, which as of the time of the recording this video, SureDash is still in alpha. Once out of alpha, they'll run all the benchmarks and figure out what type of server you need for, what type of CPU, how much RAM, all those other fun things that no one really wants to think about. And things you only have to think about if you put it on a WordPress site. So to my point here, communities bloat, they get slow and heavy, and they slow down your server, and they get to the point where you're going to have to upgrade your storage. And all of the same issues exist for communities that existed for email. And that is the same issue with backups, staging, security issues, and long-term data vulnerability. If you lose your community, if you lose all the data in your community and you had to start over, ouch, right? That's the end of the community for many people. So communities are a component, and I'm going faster through communities because we touched on all like the things and their downsides on the email tool. But communities suffer from all those same problems. And I would argue that communities are even tougher to migrate off of a WordPress solution than an email tool. If you're using Fluent CRM, you can migrate away. I've got a video, you can look for it on my YouTube channel. It's coming out, or it's already out depending on when you're watching this, all about how to migrate away from a tool like that to another tool. That's easier to do. It's arguably impossible to migrate your community from Fluent Community, or if you've built a community on SureDash using some of their community-ish features. That's going to be a tough one. You're not going to be able to do it in most cases. So I would say that that's the type of decision you need to think long and hard about, because not only is it probably a bad idea to put it on WordPress to begin with, but it's impossible to migrate it. Okay, so like I said, I was able to move through communities pretty quick because we addressed all those issues mostly with backups and staging. You just can't do it with a community. Otherwise, you'd lose all the stuff that got posted in the time being. But the last one here is commerce solutions. And I think that this one was only my 0.5 because a lot of these solutions are taken care of for you. For example, you're not storing credit cards anymore on your server. That's with Stripe or with PayPal or whatever you're using. But tools like WooCommerce are a big problem, right? Because, and I'm saying this as someone who has run a WooCommerce shop for the last 12 years. Um, the WooCommerce can be a big problem. All that customer data needs to be properly exported and stored. You need to be thinking about that. All of the, if you haven't been smart about asset storage, if you're running a digital shop using WooCommerce to sell access and you're fulfilling it via the digital product options in WooCommerce and you've got those stored in your WordPress library, that's a danger you got to take care of. And then lastly, subscriptions. Depending on the type of subscription plugin that you're using, those subscriptions are solely managed by the tool that's relying on WordPress, both the cron timing on WordPress, as well as some other timings in WordPress to make sure that it actually happens. There's two problems there. One, to make sure it actually happens, but the other one is what happens if your site gets hacked, crashed, destroyed, your backups were, not happening correctly, and you lose your WordPress site. Well, you just lost all your subscriptions, assuming they didn't set the subscription up in Stripe, which many these days are not doing. So, enter a tool. I talked about some solutions to the email platform, right? Finding a tool like High Level or, an email tool that you're fine using that is fine on your budget. Enter in solutions that are headless for commerce, right? SureCart, phenomenal tool. Why? Because it offloads all of that from your WordPress site to their server. Let's say your site got deleted. All you got to do is reinstall SureCart and log in, and all your customer data is on your new website. Why? Because it's stored on their server. That's a much, much smarter solution than trying to host all of that data on your WordPress site. Okay, so this was kind of feeling a little bit like a negative video, like I was picking on tools and stuff, but all I'm intending to do is to get you thinking, right? You don't have to go out and change away from Fluent CRM or cancel that community you were building in WordPress. You don't have to do that, but I want you to be thinking about the implications of your decisions this year as you decide what plugins to purchase, what third-party tools to get. There's, the concept of buy once, cry once. You're paying a little more once in the beginning rather than buying something turns out not to be the solution. Having to buy another thing could cost you more. Making decisions on server purchases and what you're going to need moving forward. These are all things to think about as you think a few steps ahead in your business or in your operations if you're just doing something on a non-business website. I have personally made the decision that anything that doesn't have to be on WordPress, I'm not going to put in WordPress. I usually do a what's in my tech stack type video each year, and I'll probably do one as things like SureDash shake out of alpha, and I decide what I'm officially using for 2025, assuming it doesn't take too long to make that decision. But I typically release one of those videos, but for now, this could suffice. My email is in High Level, my CRM is in High Level, my community and courses are in Circle. My website is still 100% WordPress. My account management for things like my community courses are in Circle, where they belong, where I can reach out to a support team and I am paying a premium, so somebody else is responsible for those problems and not for me. As a business, that's a decision we get to make. We get to choose to use a vendor to take care of those things rather than have to do them ourselves. For email, same deal. I'll never have to worry about running out of storage. I don't have to worry about the number of subscribers that I have. I just pay, fractions of a penny for sending emails. And the backups are phenomenal. There's full history, all that fun stuff. But that's somebody else's problem. That's why I'm paying somebody else for them to take care of that issue for me. And I don't have to worry about hosting it on my website, dealing with my host, or slowing anything else down. All right, I hope that was helpful to you. If you have any questions about the tech stack that I'm using or that I recommend, or a tech stack that you're using and whether or not it would be a good decision moving forward for your business, you can always leave a comment down below or check out Convology Plus in the community where we have weekly office hours where I'm helping people overcome these challenges with migrating to other tools, finding the right tools to use, and answering all those types of questions inside the community.